Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu. Welcome once again to the INH Center for Islamic Eschatology in Fez, Morocco. And today we are reading Sheikh's Imran Hosein's book entitled In Search of Hidr's Footprints in al-Zaman. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Chapter 1, the first word. Praise be to Allah, most wise, and peace and blessings on the beloved Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, who lamented that Musa alayhi salam did not show more patience with Hidr alayhi salam, the supreme teacher and guide of al-Zaman. For had Musa done so, we would have learnt more from Hidr through Surah al-Kahf of the blessed Quran. وَدِدْنَا أَنَّ مُوسَى كَانَ الصَّبَرَ حَتَّى يَقُصَّ اللَّهُ عَلَيْنَا مِنْ خَبَرِهِمَا. We wish that Musa was patient so that Allah would have told us more about both of them. Sahih Bukhari. The world today is akin to the skin of a banana, which has been tossed into a garbage bin and is rotting. Those who have hearts that can penetrate that reality of the world today are a people who consequently feel lost in what has become for them an alien world that has already been symbolically reduced in their eyes to barren dust, since it is a world now devoid of nur or light. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم وإنا لجاعلون ما عليها صعيدا جرزا. And verily in time we shall reduce all that is on it, i.e. the earth, to barren dust. The Holy Quran, Surah al-Kahf, chapter 18, verse 8. They feel disgusted, i.e. fed up with this world. They long for a way out of a lonely, tiresome, barren life, devoid of peace, contentment, and true happiness. They long for raindrops from heaven that will quench the thirst in their restless hearts, a thirst for truth and for inner peace. The few who are disgusted with the world today look with pain and increasing frustration at the rest of mankind, who consider this to be the best world ever, who marvel at all the great technological advancements of the modern age, and who equate such with progress, and whose greatest joy is to visit the glittering shopping malls of Tinseltown in order to spend more and more paper, plastic, and electronic money, while shopping for blue jeans, the latest electronic devices, and other rotting banana skins. قُلْ هَلْ نُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِالْأَخْسَرِينَ أَعْمَالًا الَّذِينَ ضَلَّ سَعْيُهُمْ فِي الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَهُمْ يَحْسَبُونَ أَنَّهُمْ يُحْسِنُونَ صُنْعًا. Say, shall we tell you who are the greatest losers in whatever they may do? It is they whose labor has gone astray in the pursuit of no more than this world's life, and who nonetheless think that they are doing good works. Surah al-Kahf 18, 103 to 104. It is to such people, the few who feel lost in today's strange world, that Surah al-Kahf speaks, perchance that they may hear. Here is the message from the surah. When Musa alayhi salam had passed the rock and had travelled some distance beyond the rock, his journey became tiresome and he was weary with fatigue and hardship. فَلَمَّا جَاوَزَ قَالَ لِفَتَاهُ آتِنَا غَدَاءَنَا لَقَدْ لَقِينَا مِنْ سَفَرِنَا هَذَا نَصَبًا. And when they had travelled on beyond the rock, he said unto his servant, Bring us our breakfast. Verily, this journey has become for us quite wearisome. Surah al-Kahf 1862. Life in al-Zaman is precisely like that. When we have lost our way in this barren world, life becomes wearisome, with no charm and no happiness. The surah goes on to convey a message that such people need to turn around and retrace their steps in life while searching for that rock on which sits the supreme scholar and guide of the age. قال ذلك ما كنا نبغي فارتدا على آثارهما قصصا. Moses exclaimed, That rock was the place which we were seeking, and the two turned back, retracing their footsteps to the rock. Surah Al-Kahf, 1864. Only that guide can explain the reality of the world in Akhir al-Zaman, and only that guide can provide such guidance as would show the way to escape from the dangers that await them wherever they turn. This is because He is the most learned of all men. Allah Most High has personally warned of the awesome dangers to faith that will permeate the world in the end time, when He declared in a hadith al-Qudsi recorded in Sahih al-Bukhari that 999 out of every 1,000 in Akhir al-Zaman will enter into the hellfire. Surah Al-Kahf also provides crucially important guidance when it says to such people that they should وَاصْبِرْ نَفْسَكَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ يَدْعُونَ رَبَّهُمْ بِالْغَدَاةِ وَالْعَشِيِّ يُرِيدُونَ وَجْهَهُ وَلَا تَعْدُ عَيْنَاكَ عَنْهُمْ تُرِيدُ زِينَةَ الْحَيَاةِ الدُّنْيَا وَلَا تُطِعْ مَنْ أَغْفَلْنَا قَلْبَهُ عَنْ ذِكْرِنَا وَاتَّبَعَ هَوَاهُ وَكَانَ أَمْرُهُ فُرُطًا. Let their hearts be content with keeping the company of those who call on their Lord God mornings and evenings while seeking His very face, and not let their gaze be distracted by the glitter of the life of the world. Nor should they obey and follow those whose hearts we have caused to become negligent of our Zikr, remembrance, and whose life works as a consequence are rendered useless. Surah Al-Kahf, 1828. People who long for Allah's face would usually depart from the godless and decadent cities of the modern age in order to seek refuge in villages in the remote countryside. All through the spiritual history of mankind, the search for the beatific vision has always demanded a retreat to the solitude of the lone and the alone. Chapter 2. Where can a Khidr be found? The guide and teacher par excellence of Akhir al-Zaman can be recognized because he sits on a rock and is therefore as firm as a rock in his thought. He is not a drifter sitting on drifting sands whose viewpoint drifts in whichever direction the wind is blowing in London, New York, Paris, etc. قَالَ أَرَأَيْتَ إِذْ أَوَيْنَا إِلَى الصَّخْرَةِ. Said the servant, would you believe it when we made a stop at the rock for a rest? فَوَجَدَا عَبْدًا مِنْ عِبَادِنَا. And there on the rock they found a servant of mine, i.e. Khidr. Surah Al-Kahf, 1863 and 65. If, for example, the model of conduct of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam does not allow for men and women to shake hands or to embrace and kiss each other when greeting each other socially, and if Dajjal has fashioned a new universal religion and way of life which makes it necessary or permissible for men and women to do so, the Khidr of such an age and those who follow him would stand firm as a rock in refusing to conform with such a sinful departure from the Sunnah of the Blessed Prophet. Those, on the other hand, who sit on shifting sand will constantly adapt themselves to conform in their conduct with whatever Dajjal requires of them in London, New York, and Paris, even if this requires them to betray Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The guide and teacher of the end time can be found at Majma' al-Bahrain, i.e. the place where the two oceans meet. وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِفَتَاهُ لَا أَبْرَحُ حَتَّى أَبْلُغَ مَجْمَعَ الْبَحْرَيْنِ أَوْ أَمْضِيَ حُقُبًا. And lo, in the course of his wanderings, Moses said to his servant, I shall not give up until I reach the place where the two oceans meet, even if I have to spend untold years in my quest. Surah Al-Kahf, 1860. The two oceans are the ocean of knowledge externally acquired and the ocean of knowledge internally received. And because he integrates these two oceans of knowledge into a harmonious whole, his knowledge is creative and dynamic, opposite of static and mechanical. He does not memorize this kitab and that kitab and the other kitab and then spend the rest of his life repeating by rote the same thing over and over again like a parrot. Rather, fresh knowledge and original thought flows from him like raindrops falling on a barren soil. He teaches, and lo, even the barren earth becomes lush green. And that is how he got the name Hidr, which means green. Sahih Bukhari. This writer has no knowledge of who is Hidr of the Quran, nor does he seek that knowledge. Whatever information has been conveyed in the Quran and Hadith concerning Hidr is sufficient for this writer, and he seeks no further information. Just as he brings the dead earth back to life, so too does he bring dead hearts back to life, while giving meaning and purpose to life. He is a supreme shepherd who can recognize the wolves of this age and who knows how to protect the sheep from the wolves, especially the wolves in the Zionist-controlled banking system and petrodollar monetary system, which has given a new lease of life to bogus, fraudulent, and utterly haram modern paper, plastic, and electronic money. The Hidr of this age can be recognized because he has two distinct qualities. فَوَجَدَ عَبْدًا مِّنْ عِبَادِنَا آتَيْنَاهُ رَحْمَةً مِّنْ عِنْدِنَا وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِن لَّدُنَّا عِلْمًا. So they found one of our servants on whom we had bestowed kindness and mercy from ourselves, and whom we had taught knowledge directly from our own presence. Surah Al-Kahf, 1865. Firstly, he is always a male human being, never a woman or angel, etc., of supreme kindness and compassion. And secondly, he is blessed with internal, intuitive spiritual insight in consequence of receiving knowledge directly from Allah. That spiritual insight gives him the capacity to recognize and to interpret knowledge which has come from above in an external form, the boat, the boy, and the wall which was crumbling, which requires interpretation in order for its internal reality to be penetrated and thus correctly understood. Is it possible for a scholar to integrate knowledge externally acquired with knowledge internally received? This writer is conscious of the fact that an invisible barrier, barzakh, separates the ocean of salt water from the ocean of sweet water. وهو الذي مرج البحرين هذا عذب فرات وهذا ملح أجاج وجعل بينهما برزخا وحجرا محجورا. And he it is who has given freedom of movement to the two great bodies of water, the one sweet and thirst-allaying, and the other salty and bitter, and yet has wrought between them a barrier and a forbidding ban. Surah Al-Furqan, 25:53. مرج البحرين يلتقيان بينهما برزخ لا يبغيان. He has given freedom to the two great bodies of water so that they might meet, yet between them is a barrier which they may not transgress. Surah Al-Rahman, 55:19-20. This writer recognizes the two oceans of knowledge to be analogous to the two bodies of water, the sweet and the salt. Knowledge externally acquired is analogous to salt water, and knowledge internally received is analogous to sweet water. Just as with the two bodies of water, the salt and the sweet, so too with the two oceans of knowledge. There is a divinely ordained hijab or veil which separates them from each other. It is only when Allah lifts or removes the hijab which separates the two oceans of knowledge that scholars of the Quran can succeed in integrating the ocean of knowledge externally acquired with the ocean which is internally received, lifting the hijab which separates the two oceans of knowledge. Since Allah Most High has declared that He is the nur or light of the samawat or parallel universes and the ard or the material universe, the implication is that His nur permeates all creation. Hence it is with Allah's nur that the hijab or veil that separates the two oceans can be penetrated or lifted. The secret key with which a scholar can access Allah's nur, through which the invisible barrier can be penetrated or lifted, is that rahmah must permeate his life. It is for this reason that Allah has made mention of rahmah while also informing us that He bestowed knowledge directly from Himself upon Khidr alayhi salam, Zikr and Fikr. Allah Most Wise will lift the hijab or veil for only those who pursue the quest for knowledge with the simultaneous embrace of the dual instruments of Zikr, i.e. remembrance of Allah Most High, and Fikr, i.e. deep thinking. When they do so, they are eventually blessed to recognize the presence of truth, al-haq, and hence light, nur, in all of Allah's creation, and can thus both recognize and dismiss al-batil, or falsehood, whenever and wherever it raises its ugly head. This is particularly important when truth is dressed up to look like falsehood, and vice versa. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب الذين يذكرون الله قياما وقعودا وعلى جنوبهم ويتفكرون في خلق السماوات والأرض ربنا ما خلقت هذا باطلا سبحانك فقنا عذاب النار. Verily, in the creation of the heavens and the earth, and in the succession of night and day, there are indeed messages for all who are endowed with insight, and who remember Allah when they stand, and when they sit, and when they lie down to sleep, and thus reflect on the creation of the heavens and the earth. O our Sustainer, Thou hast not created aught of this without meaning and purpose. Limitless art Thou in Thy glory. Keep us safe then from suffering through fire. Surah Ali Imran 3:191-192. We should carefully note that while dhikr and fikr are to be pursued simultaneously, dhikr must precede and permeate fikr. Hence, proper fikr is not possible without dhikr. It should be a matter of considerable sorrow to our readers that today's numerous assemblies of dhikr seem to have abandoned the simultaneous embrace of fikr. Just as disturbing is the result of the secularization of education, in consequence of which dhikr has now been divorced from fikr. Two oceans in the Quran. Knowledge that has come from Allah Most High is located first of all in the blessed Quran, which is comprised of two oceans of ayat, or verses. There is an ocean of ayat which are muhkamat, i.e., which are plain and clear, and this ocean is known as Kitab, the mother or heart of the book. There is in addition a second ocean of ayat in the Quran which are mutashabihat, i.e., they have to be subjected to ta'wil or interpretation in order to be properly understood. Surah Al-Kahf has sent a message through this narration of the encounter of Musa and Khidr, that the two oceans of ayat in the blessed Quran, on whatever the subject that is being studied, have to be harmoniously integrated in order for the scholar, teacher and guide to penetrate the reality of the world in al-Zaman. The outstanding scholar of Islam and my teacher and guide of blessed memory, Maulana Dr. Muhammad Fadlur Rahman Ansari, rahimahullah, has explained in his magnus opus, The Quranic Foundations and Structure of Muslim Society, in 2 volumes, that the integration of the knowledge conveyed in all the verses of the Quran on a particular subject into a harmonious whole is not possible without locating the system of meaning of the Quran on that subject. But the human mind, with its rational faculty, is inadequate for penetrating the system of meaning. Rather, 2 oceans must come together as a harmonious whole if the system of meaning of the Quran is to be discovered and understood. Those two oceans are the head and the heart, i.e., the rational consciousness and the emotional and spiritual consciousness. The continuous melodious recitation of the Quran and other recitations in assemblies of Zikr allow the emotional and spiritual consciousness to be activated and to develop to such an extent that makes possible the harmonious integration of these two oceans into a whole. It is dangerous for a scholar to seek to pursue knowledge while equipped with only one of the two oceans, or with a state of imbalance within him in the relationship between the two oceans. In the case of Iblis, his head ruled over his heart, and he declared that he was better than Adam alayhi salam, while refusing to obey Allah's command to prostrate himself before Adam. And in the case of Mansur al-Hallaj, it was his heart which ruled over his head, and which led him to declare, blasphemously so, Ana al-Haq, i.e., I am God. Internal knowledge and the interpretation of mutashabihat. After Hidr had explained to Musa that which had been incorrectly understood, he declared to Musa, ذَلِكَ تَأْوِيلُ مَا لَمْ تَسْطِعْ عَلَيْهِ صَبْرًا. This is the ta'wil, interpretation, of that which you had no patience to understand. Surah Al-Kahf, 1882. Surah Al-Kahf has here conveyed the further important information that the interpretation of ayat mutashabihat or religious symbolism is not possible without knowledge received directly from Allah Most High, and Allah Most Wise chooses when to send down knowledge to His servants. It is perhaps because of this reason that Islamic eschatology, i.e. ilmu akhir al-Zaman, could not be developed as a branch of knowledge before this age, for it is only in this age that He is sending the internal knowledge with which the two oceans can come together to be harmoniously integrated. Internal knowledge and the capacity to look ahead and anticipate events. A Khidr in Akhir al-Zaman who sits on a rock is capable, by Allah's leave, of looking ahead to see events which are yet to unfold in the historical process. Such insight into the future is beyond the capacity of conventional thought. Hence Musa alayhi salam, who symbolically represented Banu Israel in Surah Al-Kahf, was completely ignorant of the fact that a king would come to seize the boats, or that the boy would grow up so dangerously misguided that he would be a threat to his parents' faith. Those devoid of internal knowledge could, for example, dance to every tune that Dajjal plays, and eventually become a part of that army of Dajjal's warriors that is today known as ISIS. The knowledge which allows for insight into future events would be critically important in Akhir al-Zaman, when the world order of Gog and Magog, which is the present Judeo-Christian Zionist world order, would seek to dispossess the masses of mankind of their wealth and property in order to reduce them to such poverty and destitution as would equate to slavery. Such conditions of slavery would be necessary if Dajjal is ever to succeed in establishing his rule over the world. Allah Most High caused the process of dispossession to backfire in Greece, and as a consequence, Alhamdulillah, Greece is now returning to the embrace of Rome that is led by Orthodox Christian Russia. Such knowledge would also allow the believers to understand Dajjal's strategy with which he targets the youth in Akhir al-Zaman, and then uses them in ISIS and elsewhere to destroy not only the faith of their parents and other elders, but also threaten the very integrity of the Ummah. The believers would know to respond appropriately by cutting off ties when the dangerously misguided young in Akhir al-Zaman, who can include their own sons, daughters, and grandchildren, pose a threat to Iman, faith, of their parents grandparents and other elders, as well as to the integrity of the ummah. In the last days of the world, there will appear young people with foolish thoughts and ideas. They will give good talks, but they will go out of Islam as an arrow goes out of its game. Their faith will not exceed their throats. So wherever you find them, kill them, for there will be a reward for their killers on the day of resurrection. Please note that it is only those of them who kill others unjustly who should be killed. Sahih Bukhari. Internal knowledge and the capacity to connect dots and to thus read history accurately. The knowledge and spiritual insight of a teacher and guide, such as Khidr alayhi salam, permits him to not only see into the future by Allah's leave, but to also see into the past and to thus uncover what has been or may have been carefully concealed. Thus was it that Musa alayhi salam's conventional knowledge and powers of understanding could not make sense of a wall being charitably rebuilt in a town that was devoid of hospitality. The implication of this kind of knowledge or insight in Akhir al-Zaman is that it makes it possible for such a guide to reread and to reinterpret history quite differently from what has been recorded as history. He can do what none else can do. He can connect the dots of history to discover the movement of history as it approaches the end of history. Chapter 3. How will a Khidr and his student or disciple relate to each other? The student must search for his or her Khidr. A Khidr in Akhir al-Zaman does not search for, screen and select his students, not in Akhir al-Zaman. Rather, the students must search for that teacher, since Musa had to go in search of Khidr. The student must be humble when seeking to be accepted as a student or disciple of a Khidr. When they find him, they must humbly seek permission from him to keep his company so that they may learn from him. This is because humility is located at the very heart of the process which allows Khidr to impart knowledge in Akhir al-Zaman. The divine wisdom ordained a very humbling trial indeed for an all-knowing Musa when he was instructed, in order to find the most learned of all men, that he had to put a fish in a basket and then set off on his travels, while constantly remaining in wait for the moment and the place where the fish would jump out of the basket and make its way into the water. Surah Al-Kahf warns the would-be students that the methodology of study used by a Khidr in Akhir al-Zaman is different from that which is normally employed when students are taught. The student may not question and enter into arguments while challenging this teacher, other than to humbly and politely seek further clarification or explanation. The student does not debate with this teacher. Rather, the student waits with patience for an understanding of what was taught, or for what the teacher has to offer as further explanation and clarification. In what is perhaps the most powerful of all the verses of Surah Al-Kahf, Khidr responded to Musa's request to be accepted as a student with the following very firm declaration: قَالَ إِنَّكَ لَن تَسْتَطِيعَ مَعِيَ صَبْرًا. The other answered, Behold, thou wilt never be able to have patience with me. وَكَيْفَ تَصْبِرُ عَلَى مَا لَمْ تُحِطْ بِهِ خُبْرًا. For how can you be patient about something that is located beyond your capacity to comprehend? Surah Al-Kahf 18:67-68. Muhammad Asad, the modern commentator of the Quran, has made the following comment to these two verses of the surah: that you do not encompass with your experience khubra, according to Razi, an allusion to the fact that even a prophet like Moses did not fully comprehend the inner reality of things, haqa'iqul ashya kama hi, and more generally to man's lack of equanimity whenever he is faced with something that he has never yet experienced or cannot immediately comprehend. In the last analysis, the above verse implies, as is brought out fully in Moses' subsequent experiences, that appearance and reality do not always coincide. Beyond that, it touches in a subtle manner upon the profound truth that man cannot really comprehend or even visualize anything that has no counterpart, at least in its component elements, in his own intellectual experience. And this is the reason for the Quranic use of metaphor and allegory with regard to all that is beyond the reach of a created being's perception, al-Ghayb. Quran 1868. My own view is that the world will change so profoundly in Akhir al-Zaman that it cannot be understood by conventional scholarship. Only a very special scholarship that is enriched with spiritual insight, of which Khidr is the model par excellence, can penetrate, understand, and explain the world in Akhir al-Zaman. Perhaps I may be excused for sharing with the gentle reader this very personal information that Allah Most Kind gave insight to my father of blessed memory, Ibrahim Nazar Hussein, who was a school principal, and I was blessed among all his children to inherit from him that gift of insight. The teacher is not infallible. If the student is not convinced that the teacher is rightly guided, then he should leave him and seek another teacher. But the student may not argue and debate with a Khidr. A message of warning. A Khidr does not tolerate those who claim to be learned and to be superior to the rest of mankind. He warns them that they will not have the patience needed for them to acquire knowledge from him, knowledge which otherwise would remain permanently beyond their reach. He silences them because of their arrogance by prohibiting them from asking questions. If an impatient student persists in debating with him, that student will eventually be dismissed from his company. وَقَالَ هَذَا فِرَاقُ بَيْنِي وَبَيْنِكَ. This is where and when we part from each other, you and I. Suratul Kahf, 1878.